Imagine, you've been saving up for 4 years to take your family to the one event you've been talking about since you were literally a kid.
Right, like the ultimate bucket list trip.
Exactly. You've got the savings account ready, you've mapped out the travel, and you finally log into the ticketing portal. And, the little loading icon is spinning, the digital waiting room clears, you finally get in.
Best feeling in the world. For a second, anyway.
Right, for 1 second. And then the screen calmly informs you that 4 nosebleed seats in the absolute upper corner of the stadium are going to cost you $16,000.
Which is just, it completely shatters the illusion of what this tournament is supposed to represent.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at a game that was literally built in dusty streets, right? In schoolyards, on, packed dirt patches by billions of people who own absolutely nothing but a ball.
Sometimes just a bundle of rags taped together.
Exactly, the ultimate accessible sport.
And so today, we are tearing into a massive new research dossier dated May 6th, 2026. And it explains exactly how the most accessible sport on Earth got hijacked.
Hijacked is definitely the right word for it.
Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the unprecedented, record-breaking ticket prices for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Because if you read the early press releases from a couple of years ago, the mythological entry point was supposed to be a $60 ticket.
Right, the famous $60 promise.
Yeah, it was pitched as this deeply democratic, accessible price point.
Which was, well, a completely fabricated reality, as it turns out. Because if you look at the primary and secondary markets detailed in this dossier today, the cheapest available seats are nowhere near $60.
That isn't close.
No. And on the extreme end, you have resale seats sitting on official platforms for $11.5 million.
$11.5 million. I couldn't even process that number when I first read the brief.
It doesn't even sound like a real number for a sports ticket.
It really doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
You could buy, a fleet of luxury cars or a sprawling estate for the cost of 90 minutes of soccer. But getting past the initial shock, what this dossier reveals is that this isn't just a sports story anymore.
No, it's way bigger than that.
Yeah, we are looking at a live, multi-billion-dollar economic experiment.
It is a complete systemic overhaul of how live entertainment is monetized. We're talking about dynamic pricing algorithms being unleashed on this massive international scale.
Oh, the algorithms.
Yeah. And on top of that, we're looking at massive geopolitical hurdles actively suppressing attendance. We are seeing literal fan rebellions on the ground in the host cities.
Like actual grassroots organizing against it.
Exactly. And the whole thing is culminated in a formal, aggressive legal complaint filed with the European Commission.
So if you are joining us for this deep dive, seriously, get comfortable. Because we are about to explore the mechanics behind this massive shift.
It's a lot to untangle.
It is. We are going to figure out how a tournament designed to unite the globe fundamentally priced out the very people who built the culture of the sport. So let's start with the raw numbers.
Yeah, let's lay down the baseline.
Because the initial sticker shock on the primary market is just staggering. Forget the $11 million resale listings for a second. Let's talk face value, direct from the vendor.
The primary market numbers are really what set the baseline for this entire crisis. According to the dossier, face value tickets for the final match go up to $10,990.
Which is wild. And that is not a VIP luxury box, right?
No, that is just a standard stadium seat.
A piece of plastic. And if you are trying to just get in the door, the cheapest available final ticket, assuming you somehow beat the digital queue and the bots, is $4,185.
Over $4,000 just to be in the building.
Right. And I want to put that into historical perspective for you. Let's look back at the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. The equivalent entry-level ticket for that final was about $580.
So you're looking at a 7 times multiplier in a single 4-year cycle.
Yeah.
A 700% increase to access the exact same tier of product.
It's insane. And I actually pulled the global macroeconomic stats from the appendix of the dossier to see if there was any universe where this made sense. Did everyone suddenly get super rich?
Spoiler alert, they didn't.
No. Global wage growth averaged well under 5% per year over that same 4-year window.
Right.
Cumulatively, maybe the average fan saw a 20% bump in their income if they were incredibly lucky.
Right.
Meanwhile, the baseline cost to enter the biggest sporting event on the planet jumped 700%.
The math is violently exclusionary, and what is truly fascinating here is how the leadership of the sport is attempting to intellectually justify this absolute decoupling from reality.
Oh, the justifications are the best part.
Oh.
Or the worst part, really.
Yeah. The dossier heavily features a recent appearance by FIFA President Gianni Infantino at the Milken Institute Global Conference in Beverly Hills.
Okay, the Milken Conference. Let's just pause on that.
Right.
A gathering of global billionaires in Beverly Hills. What better place to explain why a working-class sport now costs $5,000 a ticket?
Yeah, the optics are interesting,
Yeah.
but his defense was entirely built on deflecting the blame onto the host nation's market conditions. Specifically, he argued that the United States has incredibly permissive ticket resale laws compared to Europe or South America.
Okay, so what's his actual argument there?
It essentially boils down to this. If FIFA prices a ticket at a fair, accessible rate, say $100, the secondary market is just going to scoop it up using automated bots and flip it for $4,000 anyway.
So his logic is, well, the scalpers are going to extort the fans anyway, so FIFA might as well be the ones doing the extorting and capturing that profit margin.
Basically, yeah. That is the quiet part spoken out loud. He is claiming that cheaper face value tickets are functionally pointless in an open market.
Wow. But the dossier highlights a specific moment from that conference that I think will live in sports broadcasting infamy. Because Infantino didn't just defend the market forces. He really leaned into the absurdity of it all.
Oh, the hot dog comment?
Yes, defending these astronomical prices. He literally promised, like, into a live microphone, to personally deliver a hot dog and a Coke to anyone who pays $2 million for a final seat.
I mean, it was presented as a joke, but it inadvertently revealed a massive level of executive hubris.
It really did. And I couldn't stop thinking about that throwaway comment. I actually sat down and ran the math on this hypothetical $2 million hot dog scenario.
Oh, you did the math. Let's hear it.
I had to. Let's really break down the underlying economics of what he's offering. Imagine you take him up on it, you buy one of those extreme resale tickets for $2 million. If you look at the standard concession pricing at major U.S. stadiums right now, a hot dog and a soda combo is going to run you maybe $20.
Yeah, $20 is a pretty fair estimate for modern stadium inflation.
Okay, so a standard hot dog is roughly 300 calories. A cup of soda is maybe 200. So you were ingesting 500 calories.
Right.
And you paid $2 million. If we subtract the actual $20 retail value of that food, you are effectively paying $1,999,980 for the pure, unadulterated privilege of Gianni Infantino walking down the concrete steps to hand you a lukewarm sausage in a bun.
Which works out to roughly, what, $4,000 per calorie?
Exactly. It completely destroys his own framing.
Yeah.
He was trying to make it sound like this bespoke, ultra-luxury concierge service.
Like a white glove experience.
Right. But putting microscopes on it just exposes how wildly disconnected the pricing structure is from any tangible physical value.
It really does. And Infantino's secondary defense at that same conference is equally flawed when you actually look at the underlying models. He explicitly compared hosting the World Cup in North America to hosting dozens of NFL Super Bowls simultaneously.
So he is using the Super Bowl as his baseline economic justification for charging these prices.
Yeah, but comparing the Super Bowl to the World Cup makes absolutely no sense. They are completely different ecosystems.
Fundamentally different.
Yeah.
I mean, the NFL Super Bowl is an annual single-game event. It happens exactly once a year.
Exactly.
And the audience is overwhelmingly domestic. And crucially, it is heavily subsidized by corporate spending. It's essentially a massive networking event for executives.
Right. It's B2B as much as it's B2C. But the World Cup is a month-long tournament. It features over 100 matches. It relies on an incredibly diverse, international, deeply working-class fan base.
People who have to plan their lives around it.
Yes. These are people who budget for 4 years based on historical pricing models. You can't just treat a 30-day global cultural pilgrimage like a one-off corporate Sunday in Las Vegas.
No, the models just don't overlap at all.
They don't. And that is the central tension of this entire dossier. FIFA assumed that American market elasticity could simply be overlaid onto a global sporting culture.
They just copy-pasted the Super Bowl pricing. Which brings us to the actual mechanism of how they are executing this. Because if Infantino is out there blaming scalpers and using the Super Bowl as cover, how are they actually generating these primary ticket prices?
Right. They aren't just throwing darts at a board in a boardroom.
No.
They are relying on a system that has never been deployed in the history of the World Cup.
Yeah.
They have fully abandoned fixed-tier pricing.
Completely gone.
Completely. Instead, they have introduced real-time dynamic pricing algorithms.
Dynamic pricing. I mean, if you are listening to this, you have absolutely suffered through this system at some point.
We all have.
It is the algorithm that watches you refresh your browser, looking at a flight to Chicago, realizes you really need to go to Chicago, and instantly jacks the price up $300.
Or it's the rideshare app demanding 5 times the normal rate because it started drizzling outside.
Exactly. The algorithm is designed to detect demand signals like web traffic, search volume, click-through rates, and automatically inflate the price to the absolute maximum threshold the market can bear in that exact millisecond.
But the dossier uncovers something far more insidious than just primary market dynamic pricing. And this is the part of the research that genuinely made me stop reading and just stare at the wall for a second.
Yeah, the double dip mechanism.
Yeah.
Let's get into that. Because FIFA doesn't just sell you the ticket the first time using an algorithm.
No, they don't stop there.
They also own and operate the exclusive, mandatory resale marketplace. And they take a massive 30% cut of every single transaction that happens on that board.
It is a structural masterpiece if your only goal is pure revenue extraction.
Pure greed, basically.
Yeah. By mandating that all transfers happen on their proprietary digital platform, they have transformed themselves from a regulatory sporting body into an active beneficiary of the secondary market.
Let's apply that 30% cut to the numbers we were talking about earlier, because it's nuts. The dossier points out active resale listings sitting at $2.3 million.
Okay.
Let's say some tech billionaire actually clicks buy on one of those seats. FIFA doesn't just process a digital transfer, they skim 30%. That means FIFA pulls in roughly $690,000 in commission fees on a single ticket.
A ticket they already sold once at a dynamically inflated price.
Yes, it is pure arbitrage. And it totally dismantles Infantino's defense at the Milken conference.
Completely.
He claimed they had to raise primary prices to defeat the scalpers. But by taking a 30% cut of the secondary market, they have institutionalized scalping and made themselves the primary beneficiary of the practice.
Peter Moore, the former CEO of Liverpool Football Club, is heavily quoted in the dossier regarding this specific mechanism. And, when a veteran sports executive, a guy who fundamentally understands that football is a massive corporate enterprise, calls your revenue model dystopian, you've crossed a major line.
Dystopian. That's a strong word from a guy inside the machine.
It is. Moore's critique targets the core philosophy of the governing body. He openly questioned why FIFA would aggressively engineer a system to extract $11 billion in revenue when a slightly more accessible model might yield $8 billion.
Like, isn't $8 billion enough?
Right. His point is that taking a 30% cut on resale turns the organizer into an active participant in market manipulation. They actually want the prices to surge on the secondary market because their commission scales infinitely with the hyperinflation of the ticket.
I was trying to come up with a real-world analogy for this, and it really is like an airline. Imagine an airline sells you a ticket at a dynamically surged price.
Okay, pretty standard so far.
You get to the airport, and your plans change, or you see someone in the boarding line who desperately needs to get on that flight. You decide to sell them your ticket. But the airline steps between you, says you can only transfer the ticket using their proprietary app, and then demands a 30% cut of whatever cash the guy hands you just for authorizing the transfer.
That's a perfect analogy. The closed-loop digital ecosystem makes it inescapable. You cannot hand someone a paper ticket anymore outside the stadium.
Right, those days are gone.
The biometric and digital wallet locks ensure that every single cent of secondary market desperation is taxed by the governing body.
But here's the massive contradiction staring us right in the face. Algorithms are supposedly these cold, hyper-efficient machines, right? They're designed to perfectly match supply with demand.
In theory, yes.
So if prices are skyrocketing, it implies that the demand is overwhelmingly outstripping the supply.
Which brings us to the single biggest failure of this entire ticketing experiment, the empty seat paradox.
Yes. Let's lay out the conflicting data points here. On one side, you have Gianni Infantino publicly declaring that there were 500 million ticket requests for this tournament.
500 million.
To put that in perspective, that is 10 times the combined ticket requests of the 2018 and 2022 World Cups. He literally compared it to 1,000 years of World Cups at once.
A phenomenal PR metric, honestly.
Great soundbite. But on the other side, the dossier presents a verified, totally contradictory reality. Less than 40 days before kickoff, over 80 group stage games still have thousands of completely unsold seats.
80 games?
The math simply doesn't math. If you have 1,000 years worth of pent-up global demand crashing your servers, how do you have 80 separate international sporting events sitting there with empty rows just weeks before the tournament starts?
Because the algorithm hallucinates demand based on the overall prestige of the tournament, completely ignoring the reality of the individual matchups. To understand why those 80 games are empty, we have to look at the massive structural change FIFA implemented for 2026.
Right, the 48-team expansion.
Exactly. This isn't the tight 32-team sprint we are used to seeing.
No, it's massive now.
They expanded the field to 48 teams, which resulted in 104 total matches. That is a massive 63% increase in inventory.
Just a glut of games.
Right. And the political justification for this expansion was democratization. It was billed as a way to give smaller, developing football nations a chance to compete on the global stage.
And theoretically, seeing a small nation make a run is the magic of the tournament. Everybody loves an underdog.
Everybody does. But the execution created what economists call the democratization paradox. Because while smaller nations like Curacao, Cape Verde, or Jordan finally get to play, their fans are being subjected to the exact same dynamic pricing algorithms trained on the historical demand of legacy powerhouses like Brazil, Argentina, or England.
So the algorithm doesn't care about the median income of the traveling fan base.
Not at all.
It just sees a massive stadium and tries to extract maximum yield based on the brand of the World Cup.
Exactly. The dossier highlights a very specific example to illustrate this failure. Curacao is scheduled to play Ivory Coast in a group stage match in Philadelphia.
Okay.
Right now, there are standard tickets for that game sitting untouched at $380. They are not selling at all because dynamic pricing cannot magically conjure thousands of dollars worth of demand for a Tuesday afternoon game between two smaller nations in a city where neither has a massive established local diaspora.
It is such a predictable failure of applying a one-size-fits-all tech solution to a deeply nuanced cultural event. You can invite the whole world to the party, but if you put a VIP velvet rope and a massive cover charge at the door, most of the world is going to stay home.
Well said.
They increased their inventory by 63%, diluted the marquee value of the average group stage game, but priced every single match as if it were the final in Paris.
It fundamentally misunderstands market elasticity. And that misunderstanding becomes incredibly obvious when we look at the geographic disparities across the host nations. This is a tri-country tournament, right? Hosted by the USA, Mexico, and Canada.
Yep.
And the pricing data reveals a fascinating tale of 3 countries.
Let's dig into that geographic breakdown because the disparity is wild. The dossier notes that the United States is, without question, the most aggressively priced market.
By far.
Take the USA versus Paraguay opening match in Los Angeles. The absolute cheapest ticket just to enter the building is $1,120, and it scales up past $6,000.
Just for the opener.
Right. But if you look across the borders at matches in Mexico and Canada, the primary market prices are significantly lower. And what is the result? 7 of Mexico's group stage games are already 100% sold out.
Which proves that demand is highly regional and price sensitive. The algorithm is pushing U.S. prices to breaking points, assuming the American consumer has limitless disposable income for live entertainment.
Which we don't.
Right. But in Mexico, where the initial pricing tiers were set slightly lower, the local fans are absorbing the inventory instantly. Mexican fans are rapidly filling massive stadiums at a price point that the American market, despite its higher median wealth, simply refuses to tolerate for equivalent matches.
It's like the algorithm took one look at what Americans pay for Taylor Swift tickets and assumed we would drop $2,000 on a random Wednesday to watch 2 neutral countries play soccer.
It completely overestimated the domestic footprint of the sport in the U.S. market.
It really did.
Yeah.
But domestic apathy isn't the only thing keeping those U.S. stadiums empty. We have to address the geopolitical barriers that are actively sabotaging international attendance.
Yeah, this is a huge factor. The dossier includes a highly detailed travel and tourism analysis explaining why the projected influx of foreign fans simply isn't happening.
And I want to pause here for a second and address you, the listener, directly. When we look at this section of the dossier, we are strictly analyzing the objective data provided by the travel industry sources.
Exactly.
We're looking at the math of attendance. We are not endorsing, defending, or criticizing any specific political policies here. We are purely reporting on how existing governmental frameworks are acting as a physical barrier to ticket sales.
It is a critical variable in the economic failure of these specific matches. The dossier explicitly details how current Trump administration travel restrictions are creating insurmountable hurdles for traveling fans. Well, citizens from several qualifying nations, the dossier specifically cites Ivory Coast, Haiti, Iran, and Senegal, are currently barred from entering the United States without highly specific, difficult-to-obtain valid visas under existing executive orders.
So the logistical reality is, even if a fan from Senegal manages to save up the dynamically inflated ticket price,
Right.
and manages to afford the exorbitant transatlantic flight, they face a hard legal barrier at the border.
Right.
They legally cannot enter the host country to sit in the seat they paid for.
And the travel industry data goes further. It documents a secondary chilling effect.
What's that?
International fans from countries that are not strictly banned are expressing widespread anxiety regarding ICE enforcement protocols in and around the host cities and stadium perimeters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that anxiety is compounding the baseline economic friction, resulting in a massive suppression of international tourism to the U.S. venues.
It is a perfect storm. You hit an international tourist with algorithmic price gouging, then you hit them with a visa ban, and then you layer on the fear of immigration enforcement at the gates. It completely explains why 80 games are sitting empty. The global audience is functionally blocked from attending.
And amidst all this heavy, tangible geopolitical friction, the dossier includes a detail from August 2025 that feels almost hallucinatory.
Oh my God, the Oval Office meeting, it is genuinely surreal.
Yes. In August of 2025, while the ticketing algorithms are locking out fans and the visa restrictions are blocking entire nations, FIFA President Gianni Infantino traveled to Washington.
As you do.
Right. He went to the Oval Office and personally presented Donald Trump with a commemorative ticket to the World Cup final. And during this highly publicized photo op, Infantino awarded him the FIFA Peace Prize.
The FIFA Peace Prize. I literally had to read that sentence 3 times in the dossier. According to the research, this award literally did not exist before that afternoon. It was invented out of thin air specifically for that photo op.
It is an incredible piece of political pageantry. But in the context of our deep dive, it perfectly illustrates the absolute detachment of the executive tier. They are trading invented awards in the Oval Office, while the core product, the stadiums, are facing massive attendance shortfalls due to the very policies enacted by the people in that room.
Which is a perfect transition to the actual human cost of all this.
Right.
Because with the international fans blocked at the border or priced out by the algorithm, we have to look at what the everyday domestic fan is experiencing on the ground.
Yeah, the people who just live down the street from the stadium.
Right. What does this ecosystem look like for the average family trying to participate?
It looks like widespread systemic disengagement. NPR ran a comprehensive series documenting the localized fallout, and the dossier highlights a specific interview with a father from Alabama.
This one broke my heart a little bit.
It's tough. He had been planning for years to take his 4 children to a USA group stage game. It was envisioned as this core family memory.
But when he finally navigated the digital portal, he found that the absolute worst seats, the upper deck nosebleeds where the players look like tiny little ants, were going to cost his family over $1,600.
Which is devastating. And his quote in the dossier really anchors this whole situation. He told NPR that it felt like the tournament is no longer meant for people like us.
Not meant for people like us. That's brutal.
That sentiment is rippling across the entire domestic fan base because the squeeze, it does not stop at the stadium gates. The dossier references data from the publication Field of Schemes, which tracks municipal stadium economics.
Oh yeah, they do great work.
They do. And they found that it's not just the tickets being subjected to hypercapitalism. The entire surrounding infrastructure has been dynamically surged. Transit fares in multiple U.S. host cities have absolutely skyrocketed.
The transit data is almost harder to believe than the ticket prices. Like, the dossier explicitly notes that in Boston, commuter train fares are projected to rise over 1,000% during the weeks the tournament is in town.
1,000%.
1,000%. Let's build that budget for a second.
Mm.
You pay the dynamic ticket price, you pay the dynamically surged hotel rate, and then you get hit with a 1,000% markup just to ride a public commuter train to the stadium.
It completely shatters the budget of an average family. It makes attending mathematically impossible.
But, one of the most reliable constants in sports is the resilience of fan culture. When hypercapitalism constructs an impenetrable wall, fans will inevitably engineer a highly unconventional, deeply communal workaround.
Which brings us to my absolute favorite entry in this entire dossier.
The Scottish fan army.
Yes.
This is the perfect antidote to everything we've discussed so far.
Hmm.
So Scotland qualifies. Their fans are globally famous for traveling in massive, highly organized numbers.
Best traveling fans in the world.
Truly. So they look at the logistics for the Boston matches. They see the 1,000% train fare hikes, the dynamic hotel rates, the algorithmic ticket gouging, and they collectively decide they are absolutely not participating in that system.
Their solution is a masterclass in logistical ingenuity.
It's so good. To bypass the transit squeeze and the Boston hotel surge, these Scottish fans banded together on forums and social media. They pooled their money and literally hired an entire fleet of iconic yellow American school buses.
I love this so much.
Right. And instead of staying anywhere near Boston, they booked cheaper accommodations down in Providence, Rhode Island. And on match days, they're just going to convoy this massive fleet of yellow school buses straight up Interstate 95 to the stadium.
It is a brilliant, highly visible rejection of the tournament's underlying economic structure.
I cannot wait for the aerial footage of thousands of Scottish fans in kilts rolling down an American highway in a 50-bus convoy. It is the ultimate DIY working-class resistance. They looked at a system designed to extract maximum capital and built a literal convoy to bypass it.
They refuse to let the algorithm dictate their passion.
Exactly.
It is a phenomenal cultural victory, but fans are not just resisting with school buses and hotel boycotts. The pushback has escalated far beyond DIY logistics. They're actually taking the organizing bodies to court.
The dossier calls this the $13 billion question. We are looking at a massive, formal legal challenge brewing in Europe.
Football Supporters Europe, an umbrella organization known as FSE, has partnered with a major consumer rights group called Euroconsumers. Together, they have filed a formal, comprehensive complaint with the European Commission against FIFA.
Wow, so this is real. This is not a petition. This is not a Twitter boycott.
No, this is a regulatory legal action demanding intervention based on consumer protection laws.
The dossier quotes Els Bruggeman, the head of policy for Euroconsumers, and her analysis cuts right to the core of the issue. She argues that dynamic pricing fundamentally alters the psychological contract between the sport and the supporter.
Right.
She warns that turning fan loyalty into an algorithmic bidding war causes irreparable damage. And they didn't just file a vague grievance. The complaint lists 6 highly specific abuses of European consumer law.
The anchor of their legal strategy revolves around a specific regulatory concept known as bait advertising.
Okay, if you're listening to this and looking at this EU complaint with us right now, you might be wondering how bait advertising applies here. My initial thought was that it sounds like a classic bait and switch. Is that essentially what they are arguing?
Precisely. Under strict European consumer protection frameworks, bait advertising occurs when a corporation heavily promotes a product at an artificially low price to generate interest and positive PR.
Okay.
But they do so knowing full well they lack the inventory, or frankly the intention, to actually supply the product at that price point to the general public.
Oh, so they are directly attacking the myth of the $60 ticket.
Exactly.
Because FIFA blasted that $60 figure across press releases globally to prove how accessible the 2026 tournament would be.
Yes. The complaint alleges that FIFA used that $60 entry point purely as public relations bait. They dangled it to secure political goodwill and favorable media coverage, while simultaneously ensuring that the proprietary algorithms would instantly wipe out those lower tiers.
Just gobble them up.
Right, and then push the actual available inventory exponentially higher behind the scenes.
Ronan Avain, the executive director of FSE, is quoted in the dossier summing up the legal action. He calls the entire pricing structure a monumental betrayal of the global fan base.
Monumental betrayal. And when you analyze the financial architecture of the governing body itself, the concept of betrayal takes on a much sharper edge. Because legally, FIFA operates as a non-profit organization.
Wait, A nonprofit organization. Let's open up the financial section of the dossier right now, because the irony here is incredibly thick. According to their own official projections, this nonprofit entity is expecting to generate $13 billion in revenue for the 2026 cycle.
13 billion. That represents a 73% increase in revenue compared to the previous 4-year cycle.
And the dossier breaks down where that massive surge is coming from. $3 billion of that total is expected to be generated strictly from ticketing and hospitality.
Just from getting people in the door.
Now, if we want to be completely objective and look at both sides of the ledger, they did increase the payout to the actual athletes. The prize pool for the participating teams was raised to $871 million.
That is a notable increase for the federations. But, I mean, a prize pool of less than $1 billion against $13 billion in revenue leaves a massive surplus.
A huge surplus.
Yet, when you look at the broader balance sheet, the narrative of financial health completely unravels. Despite this unprecedented algorithmic cash grab, FIFA's total financial reserves actually fell by 8%. And worse, their total liabilities doubled.
How is that mathematically possible? How does a nonprofit organization pull in $13 billion, double their liabilities, and drain their reserves?
It's baffling.
Oh, wait. The dossier has an addendum on executive compensation. Let me just look at this. The CEO currently pulls in a base salary of $6 million, and that number is heavily favored to rise significantly after the 2026 windfall is fully realized.
The juxtaposition is just glaring. You have a nonprofit mandate, which is legally supposed to be dedicated to the global development of the sport, right?
Right.
And it's funding itself through predatory pricing models that entirely exclude the working class, while simultaneously supporting executive compensation packages that rival massive corporate hedge funds.
Which leads us to the ultimate overarching question that this entire dossier has been driving toward since page 1. If you are a nonprofit whose literal mission statement is to develop football for everyone, everywhere, at what point does "we need this money to grow the sport" officially become "we just really, really like money"?
It is the defining existential crisis of modern sports economics. The infrastructure is essentially cannibalizing the culture. When you optimize entirely for revenue extraction, you inevitably erode the underlying passion that makes the product valuable in the first place.
Man, we have covered massive ground today, so let's just take a breath and guide you through a rapid recap of what we just unpacked. We started by staring down the barrel of $11.5 million resale tickets and Gianni Infantino's bizarre promise to hand-deliver a hot dog to justify the inflation.
We examine the mechanics of the dystopian double dip, where the governing body mandates a closed-loop system specifically to take a 30% cut of secondary market desperation.
We looked at the mathematical paradox of the algorithms, how expanding to 48 teams and miscalculating market elasticity resulted in 80 games sitting unsold, despite claims of 1,000 years of pent-up demand.
We objectively noted how international travel bans and geopolitical friction are actively suppressing the global audience. And, on a lighter note, we celebrated the logistical brilliance of the Scottish fans utilizing a fleet of yellow school buses to dodge a 1,000% transit markup.
And finally, we detailed the massive European legal showdown over bait advertising, challenging how a nonprofit generating $13 billion can justify pricing out its own foundation.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Yeah.
We opened this episode talking about the roots of this sport.
Yeah.
The packed dirt parks, the taped-up rags. The undeniable magic of football has always been its total lack of barriers. You don't need expensive gear. Anyone with a ball can play. Anyone with a voice can cheer. But if the physical infrastructure of the professional game, like the stadiums, the digital ticket portals, the transit systems, if all of that becomes completely walled off as an exclusionary luxury experience meant only for the global elite,
does the sport slowly lose the generational passion that made its broadcast rights worth billions of dollars in the first place? If you dynamically price out the soul of the stadium, what exactly are the executives paying to watch?
That's a great question. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the 2026 ticketing dossier. Keep questioning the systems operating behind the entertainment you love. Keep a very close eye on those dynamic algorithms, and maybe, just in case, hold on to your school bus connections.